On behalf of the Director, Dr. Vanna Prasad of the Birbal Sahni Institute of Paleosciences, myself, Dr. Viveshveer Kapoor, welcome you all to the BSIP's Founders Day function. Given the COVID pandemic, we are for the first time conducting a virtual Founders Day celebration today, that is on the 13th of November 2020. I now request our Director, Dr. Vanna Prasad, and Senior Scientist of our Institute, Professor Mukund Sharma, Dr. Amit Ghosh, Dr. Anjum Farooqi, and Dr. Binita Partyal to pay floral tributes to Professor Birbal Sahni and Sir Albert Charles Seward, and also light diyas in fond memory of both stalwarts in the field of paleobotany and allied sciences. I now request our Director, Dr. Vanna Prasad, to deliver her welcome address.
Welcome you all at the Founders Day function. I welcome both the speakers, Professor Robert Morley and Professor Jivya Prasad, and we are thankful to them for agreeing to deliver Seward Memorial and Birbal Sahni Memorial Lecture on this occasion. Professor Birbal Sahni, scientist extraordinaire, was a visionary. The vision and creativity of Professor Sahni are there for anyone to see in the form of his work and his publications. But there is no greater evidence than the BSIP itself. Professor Sahni, a graduate of Emmanuel College at Cambridge, carried out his PhD with Professor Albert Charles Seward of the London University. Upon return from his successful education, he worked for short periods at Banaras Hindu University and Punjab University. He joined the University of Lucknow Department of Botany in 1921. He was also the first professor and head of the department. Professor Sahni spent over 20 years before conceiving of and establishing an institute of paleobotany. Professor Sahni's life are a study in dedication, service, sincerity, vision, painstaking labor, relevance of details in investigative science, etc. What he visualized then becomes a stepping stone for the formation of an institute. We need to build on that, we need to expand on that, we need to take this science beyond the limits of being considered only as a science of fossils. Our institute is now an amalgamation of paleobotany, geology, paleontology, geophysics, geochemistry, and paleogenetics. This blending has helped us to reconstruct more accurately our past climate, past ecology, paleogeography, paleoceanography, and in better understanding of our ancient civilizations. We have delved into evolutionary biology and climate change and in the areas of hydrocarbon exploration research. We have also carried out commendable work in archaeology, archaeobotany, and ancient DNA studies. The BSIP's footprints are now clearly visible in areas other than classical paleobotany, but do we rest now? No, we do not. We move ahead with greater determination, greater fervor, reaching out and looking inwards, strengthening our weaknesses and improving upon our strengths. We bring out variety together as a unified force and stand as one, investigating, publishing, solving puzzles that have been elusive, carrying the name of the Institute to yet greater heights. We all know that large number of scientists and research students working in the area of quaternary time period in the country. It was decided by many that BSIP can provide a platform for the development of Quaternary Research Association. Hence, the Association of Quaternary Researchers (AOQR) was formed in December 2019. I'm happy to present its website to public from today. It is www.aoqr.org. This recently established association is committed towards the overall ascent of quaternary research in India. The association aims to bring together the different researchers, students working in different aspects of quaternary research in India. The recent webinar during September-October was successful, attending by many participants represented from various regions of country, and the series drew in an international crowd as well. Overall, the series was critically acclaimed, received tremendous support and an overwhelming positive feedback. The Institute has scientific achievement galore, but the one achievement I would like to make a special mention of is an offshoot of our commitment to society has been the COVID testing facility that the BSIP has developed when it was urgently required in the country. During the testing period, we had zero pendency, which was very difficult to maintain, and we were identified as the fastest lab in COVID testing in the country. It is a matter of great pleasure and pride that we completed 92,000 tests yesterday. It is a statement of commitment, a statement of dedication, and a statement of cohesive teamwork at BSIP. BSIP is perhaps the only institution in India that has actively undertaken COVID-19 testing despite having no previous diagnostic experience. The COVID team and all those directly and indirectly involved deserves sincere appreciation for their work. At the end, I would like to thank everyone at the BSIP who braved the COVID crisis to keep the institute moving forward. I would like to thank Secretary Department of Science and Technology, members of AI Division at DST, the chairman and members of the governing body, and the chairman and the members of Research Advisory Committee for their continuous support and guidance in the institute activities. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Today, we release the volume 69, 1 and 2 of the journal The Paleobotanist that includes numerous research articles dealing with fossil mega floral remains, penological records, dendrochronology, and other allied aspects on various sedimentary sequences from the Indian subcontinent. The abstracts of the research articles have been published in both Hindi and English language. Now I request the dignitaries present here to release the journal The Paleobotanist. I also request our director, Dr. Vandana Prasad, and senior scientists, Professor Mukund Sharma, Dr. Amit Ghosh, Dr. Anjum Farooqi, and Dr. Benita Farteyal to release the annual report of the Birbal Sahni Institute of Paleosciences for the year 2019 and 2020. Thank you all for your benign presence. Continuing with today's program, the 50th Birbal Sani Memorial Lecture will be delivered online by Professor GVR Prasad, Department of Geology, Center for Advanced Studies, University of Delhi. It is with pleasure that I now provide a brief introduction of today's speaker, Professor GVR Prasad. Professor GVR Prasad is from the Department of Geology, Center for Advanced Studies, University of Delhi. Completed his PhD from the Department of Geology, Center for Advanced Studies, Punjab University, and continues to carry out research in the field of vertebrate paleontology since the year 1982. From the years 1986 to 1992, he served as assistant professor and later, that is from 1992 to 1998, as associate professor and subsequently in the years 1998 to 2008 as professor in the Department of Geology, University of Jammu. From the year 2008 to 2009, he served as professor at IISER, Kolkata, and since 2009 to date, he is serving in the position of professor at the Department of Geology, Center for Advanced Studies, University of Delhi. Over the years, he has guided numerous doctoral students and continues to do so with vigor and commitment. Professor Prasad is fellow of various national and international academies, including Andhra Pradesh Academy of Science, Indian National Science Academy, New Delhi, Indian Academy of Sciences, Bangalore, National Academy of Sciences, Allahabad, and the Academy of Sciences for the Developing World, that is TWAS. In view of his incredible contributions in the field of vertebrate paleontology, Professor GVR Prasad has been bestowed with numerous national and international awards, including National Mineral Award by the Government of India in the year 1994, University Grants Commission Research Award for the years 1999 to 2002, L. Rama Rao Birth Centenary Award in the year 2003, Shanti Swaroop Bhatnagar Prize in the year 2003, J.C. Bose National Fellowship for the years 2010 to 2020, National Award in Geosciences and Technology in the year 2019, and the Koski Grant Award of the Paleontological Society USA in the year 2020. Professor GVR Prasad has his main interest in vertebrate paleontology and stratigraphy, evolution of Mesozoic vertebrates of India in journal, Mesozoic mammals in particular, and Cretaceous paleobiography of India. Given his interest, Professor GVR Prasad has published more than 115 publications in numerous journals of international repute, including in Nature, Science, Nature Communications, PNAS, and many others. With this brief introduction, we now stream the 50th Birbal Sani Memorial Lecture by Professor GVR Prasad. We recommend the use of headphones by the audience watching this lecture via the YouTube link.
Good afternoon to everyone watching this video presentation. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Vandana Prasad, Director, Birbal Sahani Institute of Paleosciences, for inviting me to deliver this 50th Birbal Sahani Memorial Lecture. I wish I could deliver this talk at the Institute, but under the prevailing unprecedented conditions, online presentation is the only option available to us. In my talk, I would be discussing about how life has changed during the northward flight of India from a southern latitudinal position to current position. The focus of my talk would be mainly on vertebrate fossils, but I will briefly touch upon some of the plant fossils that have been recorded in recent years. My talk is based on the extensive work that we have done on Deccan volcanosedimentary sequences and also other Cretaceous deposits of peninsular India and the Jurassic Kota Formation. I have also liberally sourced the data, colleagues' work from Indian Statistical Institute, University of Garhwal, and IIT Roorkee, and the work of colleagues from abroad. I'll be, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be talking about the how life has evolved during the northward flight of India. So we all know that India has a long geological history of uh, being a part of the southern landmass Gondwana land, and from there it has moved towards the north after drifting and drifting uh, uh, towards the north as an isolated landmass. So there are many events, tectonic events, uh, which have taken place during this period when the Indo-Madagascar block got separated from Antarctica and Australia, and then the Madagascar got separated from India and the Seychelles, and finally India collided with Asia around 50 million years ago. So this entire sequence of events can be divided into a number of phases, like we have the pre-drift phase, which is in the geological record is represented by the Triassic Malleri, Thermarum, and Jurassic Quota formations. And then we have the early drift phase, which is essentially uh, known by a number of lower Cretaceous deposits like Gangapur and East Coast Gondwanas, and also the lower Cretaceous of Kaveri Basin. And then we have the late drift phase, which is mainly by the Deccan intertrapean beds and also the Kalamedum formation of Kaveri Basin and bog beds of the Narmada Valley. And finally, the early collision phase, which is uh, known, the fossil record for this phase is known from the Kembe Shale uh, in in the western India, and also some of the Paleogene formations in west of the western India. If you take the separation of Madagascar as the starting point and the collision with Asia as the ending point, then you have at least about 30 million year isolation of the Indian subcontinent. So in such cases, when we have land masses which remain isolated for a long period of time, like for example South America or Madagascar or Australia, so we find that the fauna will undergo different processes of evolution, for example, patterns of evolution. One would be the vicarious evolution, so in which a lineage which was present on a single landmass, when the landmass gets broken into smaller fragments, then the lineage, the individual constants of the lineage, they evolve in isolation and give rise to new taxa. So this is the case in case of, for example, the ostrich. Ostrich was is today we find ostrich in Africa, and the other forms, other ratite birds include the emu, cassowary, and uh, the uh, kiwis, and also rhea from South America. So they have evolved separately on these continents after the breakup of the Gondwana land, and this is a result of the plate tectonic event. So this is one possibility, that when we have the continents moving away from each other, so this kind of evolution could take place. And the second one would be the endemic evolution. We have best examples in South America, which has remained completely in isolation for a long period from, say, late Cretaceous to Pliocene. Similarly, Australia was an isolated landmass for a long uh, period of the geological time. And then Madagascar is another example. So we have seen that the Australia has a endemic population of marsupials, and then we have South America. Uh, the mammals of South America are quite different from other land masses, and similarly, Madagascar has a distinctive mammalian fauna represented by lemurs and lorises. And the other thing that can happen during these plate tectonic events is that when the land masses, when they come together and collide, so we'll have dispersals from one landmass to other, which is known as geodispersal. These are the large-scale dispersals. We have the example in uh, the Great American Faunal Interchange, when the Panama Isthmus was established between North America and South America. There was two-way migration of mammals uh, from both the continents. And so similarly, we can also see this in the case of India when it collided with Asia. The Indian the fauna from India dispersed into Asia, and the Asian fauna dispersed into India. So these are the three possibilities when any landmass remains isolated for a long period of time. So one is vicariance, when the landmass, large landmass breaks up into smaller fragments, then you can have vicariant evolution. And then when land masses collide with each other, they will have the mixing of faunas from both the land masses. And then we have also endemic evolution, when during the isolation period they evolve fauna of their own, or a distinctive fauna of their own. The dispersal of organisms has been explained in a very simplistic manner by Simpson in 1940, and subsequently by Malcolm McCann, a mammalian paleontologist. They have shown that during when the plate tectonic events take place, there are three possible ways by which the organisms, the animals and plants, can disperse. One is through a corridor, like we have the Bering Strait between North America and Asia, which emerged during the cold climatic conditions and formed an important corridor through which animals and could easily migrate. So in such cases, we will have a balanced fauna uh, and flora on both sides of the land masses. And then we have the filters. For example, the filter corridors, like the one we have here in the picture, is about the Southeast Asian fauna and the Australasian fauna. So the Australian fauna is quite different from the Southeast Asian fauna, and you have this line which divides them, the Wallace line. And so you can see that these kind of islands, which are present between Southeast Asia and Australia, they permit certain animals to disperse from one landmass to the other. And but there is only certain groups are allowed and certain groups are not allowed. On the other hand, we have another mode of dispersal, which is known as sweepstake dispersal, or dispersal by means of rafting uh, on vegetation, floating vegetation like wood, etc. So this uh, has been seen in many cases, like between Madagascar and Africa, and also between the islands like Guadeloupe and Anguilla. Uh, the chameleons, or the iguanian lizards, they migrate from, or disperse from one island to another uh, by floating on vegetation. So this is one other way of dispersal, faunal dispersal. And you can see that in such a case, the dispersal is very chance dispersal, and they are very rare. In only rare cases such dispersal takes place. So with this background, let us move to the fossil record from India. So I'm first, let us look at the how the fauna has changed during the what was the fauna before free drift phase, that is during the Triassic and Jurassic period, how the fauna was, and what are the important changes that have taken place. So here you can see some of the it's a Archosaur reptile from the Middle Triassic Denver Formation, which has been reported by the colleagues from Indian Statistical Institute. And this comes from the Satpura Basin of the Gondwana. As you can see in the top left figure, so, the red block is the one where this fossil was found. It's nearly a complete skeleton, and it has a characteristic horns, two horns at the above the eyes. So this is a feature which has been interpreted as an indication of a sexual dimorphism in this group of Archosaur reptiles. Archosaur reptiles are the group from which dinosaurs, flying reptiles, pterosaurs, and crocodiles and birds had evolved. So, so this is a most primitive kind of Archosaur archosauromorph, which has been reported from the Middle Triassic. And then we have in the Triassic period, in the late Triassic period, we have the major component of the vertebrate fossil record. It comes from the Pranahita Godavari Valley, and the here the Malleri Formation, the Upper Triassic Malleri Formation, and the lower Dharmaram Formation. These are the two formations which have produced a large number of fossils, and the main faunal composition is represented by fishes like lungfishes, and also some freshwater hybodont sharks, and amphibians. Some of the amphibians are very large, like you can see here at the top of the slide, Metaposaurus, which is a large amphibian of the size of about 3 to 4 meters, 3 to 4 feet in length. And then we have the crocodile-like animals. It is not a crocodile, as Parasuchus here, for example. It's not a crocodile, but it looks like a crocodile. So it's an example of convergent evolution. And then we have also many reptiles like rhynchosaurs, as you can see bottom left. And then we have some carnivorous dinosaurs like the Alvacaria, uh, uh, and also some prosauropod dinosaurs like Jackalpallisaurus and Nambalia. These are the kind of vertebrates which have been recorded from the uh, late Triassic, Upper Triassic Malleri Formation, as well as the uh, Upper Triassic Lower Dharmaram Formation. So this fauna comes mainly from the Pranahita Godavari Valley. And when you look at this, the distribution of this fauna, you'll find that they are widely distributed. So one would expect, because at this time the Gondwana, and in fact the Laurasia and Gondwana were together, so it was a single landmass. So we expect to find that this fauna would be found in almost all the continents. So we have the record from similar fossil record from North America, Europe, and also South America. So there are no physical barriers between these land masses, so they could easily migrate from one landmass to the other landmass. And so we can consider it as a cosmopolitan fauna. So the Triassic fauna is essentially a cosmopolitan fauna, and there are not many barriers. So the fauna could easily migrate between land masses. Then when you come to the Jurassic, so the Kota Formation, which is the one of the is the in fact you can say the only continental Jurassic deposit in India which has yielded so many fossils. So it it has yielded fishes, amphibians, reptiles like spinodontian reptiles, crocodiles, then lizards, iguanian lizards, dinosaurs, uh, sauropod, theropod dinosaurs, dromaeosaurid dinosaurs, ornithischian dinosaurs, and also a large number of mammals. So in this respect, it is a very important formation, and we have, in fact, two nearly complete, except skull is absent, otherwise the skeletons are complete, and two complete basal sauropod skeletons have been reported from the Kota Formation. And this Kota Formation is actually the stars you can see from where the fossils have been reported. One, Kotasaurus ammonopellensis, is the skeleton which was collected by GSI officers, and then it is housed in the Birla Science Center in Hyderabad. And the second one at the bottom is the skeleton of Barapasaurus, which is on display in Indian Statistical Institute. So, and a large number of dinosaur bones, several truckloads of dinosaur bones have been recovered from these sites. And in fact, Kotasaurus is represented by almost 12 skeletons, whereas Barapasaurus is represented by around 6 individuals. So uh, these are the two important sauropod skeletons that are known from India. And then recently, two more prosauropod and basal sauropod dinosaurs like Pradhania gracilis and Lampluxara thermarmensis have been reported from the Lower Jurassic Upper Dharmaram Formation, and in addition to that, we have done extensive work on the mammalian fauna of the Kota Formation, and we have documented as many as 8 groups of mammals. So this is the kind of diversity that you see in most of the Laurasian faunas. No such diversity has been recorded from the Gondwanan faunas. Such mammalian diversity has been recorded from the Gondwanan areas. So more recently, we have found a form which is known as Australosperidon. So this is actually on the right side, at the extreme right side. So this is a and and most of these mammals, the early mammals, are very small in size, the size of a house rat, and they're mostly, the Mesozoic mammals are mostly represented by teeth. So that's how most of them have been documented. But there are certain skeletons on the basis of which the reconstruction of the animal has been made. So this the complete skeletons have come from mostly from China and Europe, and also Mongolia and North America. So this fauna, it looks quite incongruent, because it is unlike the fauna that we see in the Gondwana. So during the Jurassic, it is about to break up of the Gondwana land from Laurasia was about to take place, and so uh, and the southern continents were together. So we expect to find a similar fauna in all the continents, southern continents. But uh, so far, uh, many Jurassic continental deposits have been studied in South America, Africa, and India, uh, and also, but there are no Jurassic deposits in Australia and Antarctica so far. And but when we look at the fauna, it's quite different from the Gondwanan fauna. The Indian Jurassic fauna is quite different. It has a fauna which is more similar to that of uh, British Bathonian deposits, uh, the Bathonian deposits from England. And also, recently I have had an opportunity to evaluate a thesis from French university, and I found that recently they have found a very rich assemblage of microvertebrate fauna from the northwestern Africa, from Morocco. And there, when you compare the Moroccan fauna with the Indian fauna, we find there are a lot of similarities between the two, and both have Laurasian. The fauna from both the localities have Laurasian affinities, very few connections with the Gondwana. So that shows that possibly during this period, in the Middle Jurassic and Late Jurassic time, the Gondwana land has developed some provincialism. So within the Gondwana, we have some provinces which have distinctive faunas. So this blue line actually, it's just to show that possibly there was a kind of provincialism within the Gondwana, and we do not know exactly what is the barrier, what are the physical barrier between these land masses, uh, so that this uh, fauna could take place, could develop. So then, coming to the early drift phase, that is around 120 million years, when the breakup between Indo-Madagascar block from Australia and Antarctica took place. This happened when the uh, the Kerguelen hot plume erupted. Then the Central Indian Ocean has opened up, and the lot of plant fossils have been reported from the early Cretaceous rocks of Rajmahal formation, and also Gangapur and Chikyala formations, and some of the east coast Gondwana deposits. But no significant vertebrate fossils have been reported from this time slot. So it is actually, the record is very limited and very poor. So we cannot comment much on for this period. So then we have, of course, there are some, we have recorded some shark remains from the Kaveri Basin, which is in the southern part of the India. And here, the Karai Formation in Kaveri Basin has yielded a large number of sharks. We have around, uh, say, 500 shark teeth, which have been recovered from this formation. And when you look at the fauna, the shark fauna, this is we have at least 5 taxa, which are uh, about out of the 8 taxa that we have reported, 3 are cosmopolitan, but 5 are actually uh, known from high latitude areas. So as you can see here, most of these stars, they indicate the places where these sharks have been found. So either they were found in the southern hemisphere or in the northern southern part of the Gondwana or in this northern part of Europe and Asia. So this shark fauna is mostly they lived in a cold climatic conditions. As we know that at this time the Indian plate was in a southern latitude, so naturally we would expect to have this kind of high latitude taxa. So when during the late drift phase, this is the time when the Morondava flood basalts have erupted along the coast of Madagascar, and at the same time, Saint Mary Island flood basalts along the western coast of India. So this is the time when these the breakup of Madagascar from India took place, and then in the latest uh, time, the collision between Kohistan, Ladakh island arcs uh, with India also took place. And during the further at the end of the Cretaceous, we have also eruption of the Deccan lava flows in peninsular India. So these are the sequences which provide us with much of the data for the late drift phase, that is the Deccan volcano sedimentary sequences, the sediments which are deposited in between the volcanic flows, and the bark beds from central India, and Kalamadu formation from Kaveri Basin. So in the Kaveri Basin, the entire Cretaceous sequence is marine, except this Kalamadu formation, which is a continental sequence. So from this, we have been able to document some important fossils. Then, uh, so when you take the case of bark beds are basically marine sediments. So we have the mostly the marine fauna, invertebrates particularly. No, not many vertebrates have been documented from this, but at the top of the bark beds, if you look at this, we have the at the bottom the red colored Nimar sandstone beds, and then above that we have the coralline the nodular limestone, and above that we have the coralline limestone. But uh, the fossils, the shark fossils, they came from mainly from a green sandstone bed which occurs just at the top of the marine sequence and just below the Lamata group. So this shark fauna is quite different from what we have seen earlier from the Kaveri Basin. So this fauna is more of a tropical, subtropical um, uh, climate uh, inhabitants. So they mostly occur in tropical and subtropical belts in warm, humid climatic conditions. So they now you can see that by the time the bark beds were deposited, the India has moved from the southern latitudes. Probably it has moved from 40 degrees south latitude to about 25 or about 30 degrees north latitudes. So that's how that's why we find these tropical sharks in bug beds. Then the the major component of our fossil record comes from the late Cretaceous rocks. Uh, they provide, uh, as I mentioned earlier, these rocks are basically from the Deccan volcanic province and also from the Kalamadu Formation. So we have evidence from these faunas. We have the evidence for endemic evolution and also presence of certain Gondwana lineages, persisting of some of the Gondwana lineages, and then the presence of certain Laurentian taxa. So the forms which have actually originated in Laurasia but appear in the Indian subcontinent in the Cretaceous. So then there are certain groups which actually originated in India and later dispersed out of India into Asia and Europe after the collision between India and Asia. So the if you look at the the top left picture, this gives the distribution of the most of the Cretaceous rocks in India. So the red one represent the marine deposits, and the uh, yellow ones actually represent the continental deposits. So the Deccan volcanic flows, as you can see in this picture, is the picture taken from Mahabaleshwar, where you can see the stepwise arrangement of the flows, and we have a number of volcanic number of intertrapian between the flows. We have many sedimentary deposits at many places, and these, and as you can see from the uh, the map at the bottom right, there all the localities which have been investigated is marked, and these are the places where which have yielded a large number of vertebrate fossils. So uh, the Deccan intertrapian beds have been dated as mastiction. Most of the outcrops have been dated as mastiction in age, that is late Cretaceous, but there are a few outcrops which, like the Jilmili outcrop in central India and also Rajamandri intertrapians, they have been dated as early Paleocene. So we, uh, the in the last 20 years or so, we have done extensive work on these sediments, and we found that the biodiversity of the uh, uh, Deccan volcanic province has improved substantially during these 2 decades. Originally, there were about 7 or 6 taxa which were known from the intertrapian beds, but now we have at least more than 100 species of vertebrates have been reported, and more than 100 species of ostracods and other gastropod species have been reported. So the evidence at the moment gives a mixed evidence. So we have evidence for endemicity, like for example the ostracods that you can see on the left side of uh, uh, the slide. There are about 98% of the ostracod species are endemic, at species level at least they are endemic to India. And similarly, in 2003, one of my colleagues from Delhi University, Bisu, has reported uh, uh, a, a new frog, Nasica batrachus sahyadriensis, from the Western Ghats. So this frog, when they have studied this frog, and they have studied the uh, molecular phylogeny of this frog, they found that this frog is closely related to the Suglacidae family from the Seychelles, and possibly it has originated sometime in the Jurassic. So since then, it has been living in the Indian Western Ghats, uh, and it is an endemic taxon of the Western Ghats. And then we have also turtles, like the Bothrymidid turtles, a group of Gondwanan turtles, which uh, initially many people actually, until recently, it was thought that the turtles have Gondwanan affinity. Of course, they have a Gondwanan ancestry, but at the lower level, lower taxonomic levels, they appear to be endemic. So recent study has demonstrated that the these turtles are endemic to the Indian subcontinent and are not known from any other landmass. Then we have also taxa of Gondwanan lineage, or Gondwanan lineages, like the mammals, the Gondwana ther mammals, uh, which Baratherium, for example, is one Gondwanathir mammal. And Gondwanathir mammals, originally they were documented from the Campanian deposits of South America. And at that time, it was thought that the Gondwanathir mammals are endemic to South America. But subsequently, we found these mammals in India, and also later they were also found in Madagascar, and more recently in Tanzania in Africa. So now it appears that this group is pandemic. This is a pan-Gondwanan group which occurs in all the Gondwanan continents, and the uh, it has the peculiar high crown teeth which are adopted for eating hard substances like, for example, grasses. And it's a coincidence that these mammals were found in association with the grass phytoliths. So that shows that the grasses were there in those deposits in which the Gondwana tears occur. So they were feeding on hard material like the grasses. And then we have also snakes like the Matsoid snake from Gujarat, from Balasinore, which where it was found, one snake was found uh, coiled around a nesting site of a nest of a dinosaur. So possibly they were predating on the dinosaur eggs. So those things were found both in the Lametta formation as well as in the intertrapian beds. And then we have also the Abelosaurid dinosaurs, which is Abelosaurids is a Gondwanan dinosaur group, which is a cousin of the Tyrannosaurus rex from North America, and this is known from both uh, South America. They're also known from Madagascar. They're also known from India, and then we have also certain fossils like the Indobatrachus pusillus, a frog, Myobatrachine frog, which is a frog of a Gondwanan origin. And then we have the Borisuchid crocodiles, which has been reported from Pakistan, from the Pub sandstone of Pakistan, which is a crocodile which is not known outside South America. So all these point to the fact that the Indian landmass has also carried some of these fossils, carried some of the Gondwanan lineages while migrating towards the north. So then, in the Cretaceous, in fact, there is a remarkable similarity between the fauna of Gondwana, of the Madagascar and India in the late Cretaceous. And you know that Madagascar was separated from India around 90 million years ago, much later than its separation from the Australia and Antarctica. And so we find there is a great similarity between the faunas of both the land masses. So you can see we have the Cynosuchus crocodiles at the top, and both in Madagascar and India. And we have the turtles, which are similar to that of Madagascar, Quinconochellis and Curmardemis from uh, Calamedu, Calamedu Formation. And then we have the phylolepid fishes, Eugaternia, which is known from Madagascar. These are the only two places where this genus was recorded. And in India, it comes from Calamedu Formation. And then we have the Gondwana ther mammals, which are known from the Intertrapians as well as the Calamedu Formation. And in India, uh, so we have the Gondwana ther like the Baratherium, and Indophis uh, phanumbri nana is a species of the frog, which originally the genus was documented from India. So Indophis sahani was documented in 1992, and this is now present in Madagascar. Then we have the Rajasaurus, which is Rajasaurus, Rahiolisaurus, and Indosaurus. These are the three abelisaurid dinosaurs which have very closely related or sister group in Mazungasaurus from Madagascar. So this, in fact, some people try to explain this similarity between the fauna of Madagascar and India by saying that this is because of vicariant evolution, because these two land masses were once together, and then around 90 million years ago they got separated from each other. So the ancient lineages continued to survive uh, on these land masses. But we believe that this is not the case. Rather, the dispersals could take place at a later stage in the late Cretaceous, because both the formations, the Maverno formation from Madagascar and the Deccan volcano-sedimentary sequences, as well as Colomedu formation, they are all Maastrichtian in age. So that is about uh, uh, about 20 million years after their separation. So we propose that there is a possibly there was a dispersal between Madagascar and India in the late Cretaceous. That is how these animals could, and the similar fauna could be found on both the continents. So this was shown recently by the documentation of a new abelosaurid dinosaur, which is known as Archovenator. So this comes from France. So this abelosaurid dinosaur, when phylogenetic analysis of this dinosaur was done, along with Mazungasaurus, Indosaurus, Rahiolisaurus, and Rajasaurus, they actually nested together and they have erected a new subfamily, Mazungasaurini. So if these lineages, the similarities between Madagascar and the Indian dinosaurs was because of their ancestry from a Gondwanan stock, the earlier Gondwanan stock. We will not find uh, such a close uh, relationship between the taxa. So because they have uh, moved out of South America long ago, so and then they had evolved in isolation, then we would not expect to find similar faunas. So we believe that this is mainly this similarity is mainly due to the uh, latter dispersals in the late Cretaceous between India and Madagascar, maybe with Africa, along through Africa, or maybe directly. So that is the story about the Gondwanan taxa. And now looking at the other elements which are present in the late Cretaceous of India, we have many late Cretaceous forms which show close relationship to that of Laurasia. So, like for example, many of the charophyte taxa, they uh, they are closely related to those of Europe and uh, mainly Europe and Asia. So similarly, we have the lizard, Angudi lizard. This is not known before the Miocene from the southern continents, but this has been reported. We have reported this from India from the late Cretaceous. So, and the oldest record of this group is from Campanian and Maastrichtian deposits of North America and Europe. And then we have the uh, frogs, which are known by the Gobiatini frogs, from which are known from Central Asia, and also from some European localities. So again, the oldest records are from Laurasia. So therefore, we believe that these taxa had actually dispersed from Laurasia into India. Then we have another important finding from the intertrapian beds, which is known as a Carmer ungulatum, one of the earliest ungulate mammal that has been documented. So if you look at the distribution of the ungulate mammals, they are known from either from in the Paleocene, late Maastrichtian Paleocene of North America, or the from the Paleocene of South America, or uh, from some of the forms have been the primitive forms have been reported from uh, uh, Western Asia, and these uh, fossils from North America and South America are more derived as compared to the Indian fossils. And we initially we thought that this possibly it is an immigrant from this Asia, the West Asian sites, and this is one possibility we should explore. And the other thing, that possibility is that, in fact, recently one mammal has been reported from the Vastan lignite mine, and this is named as Pahelia. And this is an ungulate, and there are some similarities exist from between the Carmera ungulatum and Pahelia, and of course they are not established as yet, but there appear to be some similarities. So it's also quite possible that it might have originated in India and then later uh, given rise to the latter mammals of the Paleocene and Eocene time. And one palm taxon has been reported from a qualified palm has been reported from, this was reported from Birbal Sahani Institute uh, in 2014, and this comes from the Deccan Intertrapian beds. And this palm, the oldest records of this palm, they actually come from uh, Laurasia. So the authors have proposed, Srivasu and others, they have proposed that the dispersal took place from Europe to Africa, and through the Kohistan Ras Island arcs, uh, they could migrate to India. So this is the picture for the Laurasian elements. So we have certain, there are not many Laurasian elements, but there are substantially good number of Laurasian elements which are present in the late Cretaceous of India that needs to be explained. And then recently there are papers from the Birbal Sahani Institute uh, and also uh, some from uh, the the report of Dipterocarpus leaves. So earlier, in fact, the earlier based on biomarkers, Datta from Bombay IIT, Suryendra Datta has reported uh, the biomarkers of Dipterocarpaceae, which is basically the extent uh, and oldest fossils they were known from the Asia, Southeast Asia, and Asia. So people believe that this group, the Dipterocarpaceans, they uh, originated in Asia and then dispersed into India after its collision with Asia. But Datta and others, they have shown that the we have the record of these fossils. Of course, they are in the form of biomarkers, but they were they are known from the Eocene of India. And subsequently, Vandana Prasad, Dr. Vandana Prasad and our colleagues, they have reported uh, pollen from the Deccan Intertrapian beds in 2018, and then now the the leaf fossils have been reported by Khan and others from the Intertrapian beds of Mandla area. So this is one group which is considered to have originated in India and then later dispersed into uh, the Asia and other land masses. Then there is also another report from India, from the Deccan Intertrapians. Again, we have the fruits and seeds of Indovitis. These are the grape plants which have been reported from the Intertrapian birds of Mahorsari near Nagpur in Maharashtra. And this is also considered, because this is considered as the oldest record, because uh, the records from fossil records from North America and Europe, they start appearing from Paleocene and Eocene onwards. So this is considered as the oldest, and possibly they have suggested that the the grape uh, family has originated in India, or maybe it has originated in other parts of Gondwana and subsequently dispersed out of India into Asia. So we have also a, a mammal which is known as Adapisauriculate mammal, an insectivore mammal, which we have actually uh, documented from the late Cretaceous Intertrapian beds, and this is known as Deccanolestis. And this mammal is the oldest record of this group. This comes from the Maastrichtian, whereas the latter younger records come from Northwest Africa in Morocco and all in the late Paleocene, and in Belgium it occurs in the early Paleocene deposits. So based on this, we have suggested that this group of mammals has originated in India and later dispersed into uh, uh, Africa and Europe. So there are other uh, groups like the rhinoid frogs, which uh, because the molecular studies have shown that rhinoid frogs had Gondwanan origin, and then they dispersed into Asia uh, 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 when India moved towards the north and collided with Asia. So as it moved as a Noah's Ark, all these forms have been carried to the north. So that is one hypothesis, that is out of India dispersal hypothesis, which proposes that most of the modern day South East Asian uh, biota, they had originated in Gondwana or some maybe in Africa or South America or somewhere else, and then subsequently they moved as India uh, rifted and drifted from these land masses. It carried some of these lineages, and then they had evolved in isolation on the Indian subcontinent, and then subsequently they dispersed out of India into Asia. So this is the argument of the out of India dispersal hypothesis. So we have a lot of examples which come mainly from the molecular studies, but we have very few fossil evidences, like for example rhinoid frogs is one such example. And then we have the examples of the plants like the Dipterocarpus and also Indovitis. So these provide a strong support for the out of India dispersal hypothesis. So when you look at these, all these, when you uh, take into account all these faunas, the Gondwanan, then we have the Laurentian and the endemic forms. So what we see here is that there is a distinctive Gondwanan component, which uh, some of them might have actually been derived from the ancestral stocks, but some actually, there was some dispersal between uh, Madagascar and India in the late Cretaceous. And then there is evidence that the uh, the Laurentian elements could actually disperse into and from India to Eurasia, or from Eurasia to India through some of these uh, island arcs. So in 1999, we proposed that there were Khoistan and Ross Island arcs and some oceanic islands might have facilitated the dispersal of the Laurentian elements into India. And subsequently, in 2013, Chatterjee and others, they have proposed that the there is a link between India and Africa and Europe through these island arcs, Khoistan Ross Island Arc and Oman Island Arc. So this is proposed in 2013. Now we believe that, so this link in the north, the biogeographic link, which formed as a result of the collision of Khoistan and Ras Island arcs with India, and also this actually formed an important dispersal uh, corridor, or a stepping stone for most of the Laurentian elements to migrate into India. And then we believe that based on the similarities between the dinosaur fauna between Madagascar and India, and also the many groups which are very similar between Madagascar and India, we believe that there were some dispersal routes between India and Madagascar in the late Cretaceous. Although they were separated 20 million years ago, we have several of these seismic elements like the Amaranth Ridge and Providence Bank and the Seychelles Islands. And also there was a paper in 2013 by Thorsvik, in which he has proposed that there was some Precambrian microcontinents which existed between India and Madagascar, and they subsequently they have been submerged by the later volcanic eruptions. So, if you take all this into account, possibly some dispersal could take place between India and Madagascar along these stepping stones. So this is how we infer the paleobiographic connections between India and Laurasia, and also India and Madagascar. So when you come to the pre-collision stage, that is the early Eocene fauna, we have a large number of mammals. So this was an lignite mine in Gujarat, western part of India. So this has been a source of a large number of fossils uh, that includes at least more than 10 orders of mammals have been reported from here. This is the richest fauna that has been recorded anywhere in South Asia. So uh, this includes fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, and a large number of mammals are known from here. And this during the Eocene also we have certain endemic forms, endemic because the collision, the uh, contact has not been established yet. So the Tethys, shallow Tethys still exists to the north of India. So the there was no continuous corridor between India and Asia at that time. So we have also some of the mammalian groups which had evolved in isolation, like the endemic Kimbetheirids, which are considered as the uh, archaic perissodactyls. This is the group from which the horses had evolved. So in addition to that, all these blue colored uh, groups, they all represent the Laurentian elements. So we have a large number of Laurentian elements occurring within the uh, uh, Laurentian elements occurring within the Eocene of India, and also a few Gondwanan elements, like for example, Darasaurid crocodiles, and some snakes like the Matsoid snakes and Pelomedicoid turtles. These are the Andronide frogs. These are some of the groups which have Gondwanan ancestry, but the rest of them are mostly Laurentian taxa. So that shows that by the time in the collision is about to take place, there were several uh, exchanges between Asia and India. So that's how many of these groups, which are known from Laurasia, also occur here. So this is an important thing that to note, because if you take the fossil record from Triassic onwards, we'll see there is a gradual decline in the number of Gondwanan taxa present in various deposits and various periods, and then finally it becomes more and more of Laurentian composition. So there are many of these taxa. So these are some of the Gondwanan taxa that have been reported by uh, colleagues from India and abroad. So we have the Darasaurid crocodiles and rhinoid frogs, Pelomedicoid turtles, and Matsoid snakes, and uh, then we have the Adapisaurical mammal, Indolestis calami, which has been reported by Kapoor and others in 2017. So this is a straggler from the Cretaceous. So we have the Decanolastis in Cretaceous, and then we have this derived form in the Eocene. So this mammal has survived the Cretaceous Paleogene boundary mass extinction. In conclusion, uh, the fossils from the Triassic to Eocene of India, that is the time period during which India has drifted towards the north and collided with Asia. So when you look at it gives a very complex picture, biogeographic picture. So the Triassic fauna is essentially cosmopolitan. So the, we have similar faunas in North America and Europe and also Africa. whereas the Jurassic fauna points to some provinciality that we have seen in the particularly in the vertebrate assemblages, mammals particularly. They are so diverse as that of the Jurassic mammals of UK, and also some of them are similar to those of Morocco. So we feel that there was some sort of biogeographic partitioning within the Gondwana. Then the late Cretaceous biota of India, it demonstrates some endemism, as we have seen in some of the groups, and there are forms which are closely related to those of Laurasia and those which are related to Gondwana. And this is one argument that was being put forward by many of our colleagues, that the southern lineages or the Gondwanan lineages, they may have been derived from a common ancestry, because when Gondwana was a single continent, we have the wide distribution of most of these groups, and then when it broke up, they evolved in isolation in various fragments. So vicariant evolution might have led to their occurrence in all these continents. But when you look at the similarity in the fauna between Madagascar and India, it uh, requires an explanation, and this explanation, I feel, is through the some of these stepping stones, like some of the islands which are present, and also probably some of the islands which have disappeared in course of time. So those might have served as stepping stones for the fauna to migrate from India to Madagascar and vice versa. And the northern biotic elements, they have dispersed into India using the Khoistan Ras Island arc and the Oman arc route, as it has been proposed for various elements, various Laurentian elements. And then the evidence, the fossil evidence from India, uh, at least at present, we have some fossils which indicate, like the Pranoid frogs, and also the Dipterocarpacean plants, and also the grape family Vitaceae. So they actually favor out of India dispersal of many of these groups. And so the major faunal changes during the drift phase of India is that between 150 and 160 million years, we have a predominantly cosmopolitan fauna, except the Jurassic, where uh, we are not very sure, because in Jurassic, the most of the data from southern continents is very limited. So once the exploration and prospecting takes place in these land masses, maybe it may change in future. But we at present, the picture is is similar to something like a provincial fauna. And in around 90 and 65 million years, the fauna shows both Gondwanan affinity as well as Laurentian affinity. At the same time, they are also endemic. And 65 to 50 million years, that is during the uh, Paleocene fauna, is missing completely from India, because we have very few Paleocene continental deposits, and it's only in the Eocene, early Eocene, from the Kembe shale, that we have an excellent record of fossil vertebrates, and that record shows that the during the Eocene, the fauna is more of Laurentian connections, show more Laurentian connections rather than Gondwanan connections, and there are also certain groups which have originated in India and later dispersed to Asia, like the adaptosauroid mammals. Similarly, it might also apply to Dipterocarpacean plants as well as the grape family. And so, if you look at the uh, total biogeographic scenario, we see that the India served as at different stages. It served as a different purpose. For example, in the Triassic, so India during its drift phase, it also carried a lot of extinct groups as fossils, like the Triassic fossils and the Jurassic fossils. They're all extinct fossils. So it served as a like something similar to a Viking funeral ship. So we know that many of the Viking people, they used to bury their dead on a ship, and it is left in the ocean. So in the same way, many of these dead animals or extinct animals are carried in the rocks towards the north, and finally this India collided with Asia, so they are brought the to, to the Asian mainland. On the other hand, there are many elements which are carried by the uh, northward migrating India as a Noah's Ark. Many of the forms have survived on the Indian plate, and then when collision took place between India and Asia, they dispersed into Asia. So these are the forms, like for example, we have seen that the Dipterocarpaceans and also the uh, uh, grape family as well as Adapisauridae. These are all, you can say, uh, these are the kinds of forms which might have been carried in this manner. So India also served as a Noah's Ark. So, and as you know that the during in the biblical uh, depiction that the during the great flood, Noah's flood, many of the animals and plants and humans, they boarded a ship, and this ship landed on Mount Ararat, from where they have dispersed to. Later, when the flood receded, all these animals dispersed to various parts of the world. So that is what has been depicted in Bible. So in the same manner, India carried these fossils or these different lineages from the. Some of them might have ancestral um, lineages. Some have originated in India, and those were carried towards north, and then they dispersed out of India after it landed uh, at the footsteps of the Asia. So, and then we have the evidence for out of India dispersals for many of the taxa, like so the out of India dispersal for many of the Gondwana taxa, which boarded India and subsequently they dispersed into Asia. So these are the various uh, ways that the Indian plate has uh, carried the extinct taxa as well as the extant taxa to Asia. So, so it's for some, for the Triassic and Jurassic, it served as a Viking funeral ship, and whereas for the some of the extant taxa, it served as a Noah's Ark. So, thank you for your patience, uh, and I would like to thank all these organizations which have supported our research in the past, and also the all my past students. Thank you.
We thank Professor Prasad for delivering a very interesting and informative lecture on the topic biological consequences of the northward journey of the Indian plain. Continuing with today's program, the 64th Sir Albert Seward Memorial Lecture on the topic Plant Dispersal from Africa to Southeast Asia and the Age of Paleotropical Rainforest will be delivered online by Dr. Robert John Morley, associated as Director with Pelinova, United Kingdom. It is with pleasure that I now provide a brief introduction of today's speaker, Professor Robert John Morley. Professor Morley completed his PhD in geography in the year 1976 from University of Hull, Yorkshire, England, United Kingdom. Professor Robert Morley, his acquaintances call him Bob, was introduced to penology by John Flenley in the year 1970s. While undertaking a PhD on the late Quaternary vegetational history of Sumatra and Malaysia, in which he placed equal emphasis on the study of rainforest ecology and the pollen record of lake sediments. He was John's first research student and was subsequently inspired by Jan Muller to study Cenozoic penology from tropical areas. Since 1992, Dr. Morley is director of Pelinova Limited, which provides expertise in application of biostratigraphy to the resolution of stratigraphic and paleoenvironmental problems to petroleum exploration companies and government research laboratories. Since 1995 to present, Dr. Morley has been honorary fellow at Department of Earth Sciences, Royal Holloway, University of London, United Kingdom. He is also an active member of Southeast Asian Research Group, that is SEARG, at Royal Holloway, University of London since 1995. From 2010 to 2014, Professor Morley has worked as Marie Curie visiting scientist at Kiel University, Germany, and joint manager of Through Flow program to determine history of East Pacific biodiversity hotspot through Natural History Museum, London, funded by a major EU grant. Since 2018, Professor Morley has been an external PhD supervisor at the University of Amsterdam, Netherlands. His interests are to apply methods developed for quaternary studies to solve issues of Cenozoic stratigraphy and using fossil pollen data, and to clarify the pattern of evolution and development of tropical floras by integrating pollen and molecular data. His primary aim is to ensure that unpublished petroleum industry archives of biogeographical interest are brought into the public domain. Given his interest in penology and biostratigraphy, over the years, Professor Morley has published more than 125 research articles in journals of international repute, including Nature Communications, Journal of Limnology, Journal of Tropical Ecology, and many others. As Dr. Morley's major interests are also to understand the mode of evolution of tropical rainforest, he wrote the now classic book, Origin and Evolution of Tropical Rainforest, which was published in the year 2000. With this brief introduction, we now stream the 64th Sir Albert Seward Memorial Lecture by Dr. Robert John Morley. We recommend the use of headphones by the audience watching this lecture via the YouTube link.
Well, my name is Robert Morley. I'm delighted to have been invited by Birbal Sahni to present the 64th A.C. Seward Memorial Lecture. This is quite an honor for me. I actually presented this lecture in March, but due to COVID, I had to give it to a very limited audience. And so now I'm re-recording this so you get a nice version with clear figures. And I hope that it will be clear enough for everybody to understand. Right. My name is Robert Morley. The talk I'm presenting is Plant Dispersals from Africa to Southeast Asia and the Age of Paleotropical Rainforests. This talk is the 64th A.C. Seward Memorial Lecture to the Birbal Sahni Institute. To present this talk, first of all, I'd like to thank Birbal Sahni for inviting me to Lucknow. It's somewhere I visited a long time ago, just after I graduated in the 1970s. I think it was the International Palynological Congress there, which was a remarkable event. I'd also like to thank Vandana Prasad, who's letting me use some of her amazing dipterocarp, fossil dipterocarp pollen photos, which you can see on this picture. Also, Peter Ashton, who is a long-term expert on dipterocarp evolution, and we've discussed issues relating to dipterocarps with Peter over many years. John Teasdale. John is a geologist. He runs a company called Geognostics, and he's produced some tectonic animations for Southeast Asia and India, which are just remarkable and which are very helpful in trying to understand the manner in which this area has developed over time. The only problem is his animations are a proprietary commercial data set and are not yet published, but we're hoping to publish it soon, so we'll be able to get some of these details out to everybody. I also want to thank Omar Babika Abdul Rahim and Shah Eldin Hassan. These gentlemen are from the Sudan petroleum research laboratories in Khartoum, and they very kindly provided us with some samples, which I thought are going to yield some of the oldest dipterocarp pollen. And they've lent us these samples. We've analysed them with Vandana's help in Lucknow. And yes, they have yielded the oldest dipterocarp pollen ever recorded, or our oldest dipterocarp fossils, in fact. And lastly, but by no means least, my wife Santi, who has provided eons of forbearance and help with the work that I tend to do. Okay, so there's four main issues I want to cover. First, I want to look at floristic provinces through time, from Africa to Southeast Asia. Secondly, I want to look particularly at dipterocarp dispersal and the Khoestan-Ladakha arc, and also the relationship, the manner in which different groups of plants have dispersed from Africa via this arc to India and then across to Southeast Asia as India collides with Asia in the Eocene. Then, because there are some issues about the tectonics of Southeast Asia, I want to show you some slides that reflect the evolution or change through time of upland floras in Southeast Asia in relation to the rotation of Borneo, because there are some issues with respect to the geology of Borneo, and that is hindering our understanding of the manner in which Southeast Asian floras have evolved during the Cenozoic. And finally, some conclusions. Right, well, this is a map, a very brief sketch of the paleo-floristic regions of the world. You can see the paleotropical flora outlined here. What is remarkable, actually, that this was produced by Ronald Good, who was a professor of botany at the University of Hull, which is where I graduated. Unfortunately, I never met Ronald Good. He had retired a few years before I arrived there, but it shows that, remarkably, that little backwater in Yorkshire at the University of Hull has been a centre of biogeographical progress for nearly a century. The other great student of floristic provinces is Arman Takjahan, who, writing it a little bit later than Ronald Good in the 1960s, produced a book in which he proposed that the flowering plants actually evolved in the area of the eastern part of the paleotropical province, in the area between Assam and Fiji, which he called the cradle of the angiosperms. Now, many years ago, I was writing a book on the evolution of tropical rainforests, and I had to explain this, the reasons behind why he thought angiosperms actually evolved in this area. And I concluded by looking at fossil data that actually the occurrence of primitive angiosperms in Southeast Asia. In Southeast Asia, we have, let me just put this on the pointer. We have two areas where we find large numbers of primitive angiosperms. One is in southern China here, and sort of northern Vietnam and Myanmar. And the other is around the Coral Sea. And he thought that this association in Southeast Asia was so distinctive that it could only be explained in terms of origin in this area. But what I concluded was that actually the concentration of primitive angiosperms in this area is due to geological and climatic factors. Firstly, with respect to plate tectonics, the Southeast Asian area has provided a corridor by which boreotropical elements could disperse into the Southeast Asian region during the climatic perturbations of the Cenozoic. On the other hand, if we go to Africa, we find that the development of the Alps, the Mediterranean, and the development of the Sahara have created a major barrier for dispersal of boreotropical elements into Central Africa. And so we find hardly any boreotropical elements occurring in tropical Africa, just a few. These circles mark the abundance of these things. Sorry, no, the arrow width marks the abundance of these. And then in South America, of course, North and South America were separated until the formation of the Panama Isthmus. And so there were very few opportunities for boreotropical plants to disperse into South America. So only found a few over here. Alternatively, the concentration of Southern Hemisphere primitive angiosperms relates to the northern drift of Australasia and also, of course, Madagascar and Africa. So Africa, Madagascar, and Australasia drifted northwards during the course of the mid-Cenozoic, during the time when global climate started to deteriorate. And this allowed these primitive angiosperm groups to find refugia in the area around the Coral Sea and in Madagascar, places like that. And those are the reasons why we find so many primitive angiosperms in Southeast Asia, and that's what misled Tak Jahan all those years ago. Unfortunately, his idea has been popular for many, many years, and it still sort of lingers there. People still think that there's some sense to it, but we can find no geological evidence to support it. If we do look for records of of early angiosperms based on pollen, we find that the earliest records from pollen occur in the northern part of Western Gondwana. I've marked them here. The oldest ones are in darker blue. These are Berriasian, and these are a little bit younger, Valanginian. Then we get some Hortarivian records actually in the UK over here. But it seems that based on fossil pollen, this definitely seems to be an area of early differentiation of angiosperms. Monosulcates, of course, are the earliest group of pollen that have a record. And so if we look for tricolpates, we see a very related pattern, that the earliest records of tricolpates, and I've just picked out those that occur in the Barremian, which is the very earliest part of angiosperm radiation. And again, we can see records mainly in Western Gondwana. Again, one record here in the UK. So it really looks from the pollen record that Western Gondwana, maybe with a few dispersals into the Northern Hemisphere at different times, was the early center of evolution and radiation of the earliest angiosperms. So the occurrence of tricolpates here, of course, reflects the appearance and diversification of eudicots. Now, that all seemed very good, except that we started getting records of very early macrofossils of flowers from the Jurassic of China. Many of these have been contentious. One very early one that was thought to be Jurassic was a plant called Arctiofructus. But when people actually did accurate dating of the rocks in which it occurs, they found it to be not Jurassic at all, but Aptian. And so, but already the suggestion had been set that China was an area of diversification of early angiosperms. And there have since been several claims for Jurassic flowers from China. However, palynologists such as Doyle and others seem unhappy about this. And so I just happened, before I gave this lecture in March, I noted a paper by Richard Bateman that seemed something of an independent perspective on this. And he seemed very reluctant to feel that any of these early Chinese angiosperms were realistic. And I think the present perspective is that most of them are probably not angiosperms. However, we do find a group of very primitive angiosperms occurring in northern Australia and the Coral Sea, the Archaeoangiospermae. Could this be the area of origin of angiosperms? Well, Tak Jahan thought this would have been good in a paper he wrote in a book edited by Tim Whitmore in the early 1980s. But because he thought that angiosperms by then might have evolved on some shard that had occurred in the northern margin of Australia, and then carried across on a tectonic plate to collide with Asia at a later date. But actually, the archaeoangiospermae can't be that old, because the first angiosperm pollen that we find in Australasia is in fact a lot younger than those that we've shown here from Africa, South America, and Europe. So the oldest angiosperm records in Australasia are from the Aptian, and because Australasia had a very southerly position at this time, then angiosperms dispersed there much later than anywhere else. So we can discard this suggestion, and the likelihood is that angiosperms, in fact, had their main phase of diversification, especially the eudicots, that are the main group of plants that we see in tropical rainforests in western Gondwana. So what I want to do with the next series of slides is to look through a series of paleogeographical maps. I've used the maps of Chris Scott's, which are fantastic maps. Everybody uses them. With Scott's maps, if you look into little details, there are always tiny little differences, but as a basic tool for looking at global paleogeography, they are excellent. Now, I want to look through different time slices from the Aptian through to the Maastrichtian, and look on the one hand which the fossil evidence, and on the other which plant groups are shown by molecular evidence to become established in this particular region of Western Gondwana. So in the Aptian, if we look at palynological data, we find that there's a very distinctive plant province in Africa and South America called the Elaterites province. Elaterospores are a group of gymnosperms allied to taxa such as within the Nitales, and it produced some very distinctive pollen types that are very, very characteristic of this region over here. Now, if we go to Southeast Asia at that time, the pollen flora is quite different. We don't find any elaterospores. We just find Chlosoplis, which is from a gymnosperm group called Ptura lepidaceae. In Myanmar, there's one locality from this age, and that is dominated by Araucaria, but we're not quite sure where Myanmar was at this time. And then down in Australasia, we find typical Gondwanan flora. So in this setting here, if we look at molecular data, we find that it's likely that the Matales were prominent in becoming established in Western Gondwana at this time. Families such as Combretaceae probably became established by the Albion based on molecular data. And so we can see that key eudicot lineages became established across West Gondwana at this time. Moving up to the Turonian, we still have the same elaterospores characterizing assemblages across the African and South American region. So we still have our Elaterites province. We have very little data from the Turonian from Southeast Asia. This time, India was in a very high latitude position, attached to Madagascar, and so it was really outside the story of the development of equatorial floras at this time. Groups of taxa that can be suggested to established in Western Gondwana are the Lythraceae, based on molecular data. There are others. I haven't shown a full list of taxa that would have become originated in Southeast Asia. In Western Gondwana, but just a few distinctive examples. We move up to the Santonian Coniacean. Here we find many more taxa clearly became established at this time. Ananaceae, and work that we started to do with Peter Ashton on Dipterocarps suggest that these probably developed in the Santonian Coniacian, and this idea is being developed at the moment by myself in association with Vandana Prasad and other people at Birbal Sani, and we are going to consolidate this very shortly and demonstrate that Dipterocarps most likely developed in Western Gondwana during the late Cretaceous. We'll be talking about that later. In the Santonian Coniacian, India was in a very high latitude position still, just juxtaposed to Madagascar. So it's unlikely that there were any tropical elements dispersing into India at this particular time. Over in Southeast Asia, the flora was quite different. We see a few undifferentiated eudicots, but the background flora is characterized often by Orocarrier pollen. But our data from this time period is very limited indeed. Moving up to this early Campanian, here the character of floras across Africa and South America change, and we get a replacement of the elaterospores by palm-like pollen, and this is characterized as the palm province, which extends across this whole area. We do see some African elements coming into India at this time, but the characteristic one that is Constantinisporus, a little demi-triporate grain, originally described here from Gabon. But we don't see any elements that we might consider to be tropical elements. Across Southeast Asia at this time, there's a very poor record. We can see different groups of different families that became established in Western Gondwana based on molecular data. Now, one thing that I have postulated in the book I wrote many years ago was that this is the time of the first appearance of tropical rainforest. I thought that was likely in West Africa because there's a great diversity of pollen types appear at that time. We also find the first large seeds in angiosperms, also the first climbers, and the first large dimension angiosperm woods, which suggest substantial sized angiosperm trees. And so this is something that I suggested many years ago. People working in South America don't see evidence for multi-storied rainforests until the Paleocene, and also in North America until the Paleocene. But a lot of these areas were underwater in the equatorial region. It's only in Africa that we see this big expanse of terrestrial areas, and I think this is something that needs to be looked at in more detail to see if that's the case. Something that supports an early origin of multi-storied rainforest of large phylogenetic data sets like this one of the Palmae, and this suggests that Palmae originated in perhumid rainforests. The red lines on here in this dated cladogram all reflect lineages that originated in perhumid climates, and you can see that the blue lines here are lineages that originated in seasonal climates, and clearly they developed from perhumid ancestors. So the idea that rainforests were there in the Campanian or Coniacian is supported by cladograms such as this. Now, the authors of this paper, Thomas Couvrier and Bill Baker and co, thought that from the fossil record, the palms must have originated in Laurasia, mainly because of this fossil here, a sabal, from the Coniacian, I think it is. But since then, we have found very distinctive palm pollen, Dicopopolis and Longapatites, shown here. These were recorded by by Chris Bates, who works on rig sites in Papua New Guinea, looking at some very otherwise difficult to reach localities, and he sent me these a few months ago. And these suggest that the calamoids, which is this group here, were definitely well developed along the northern margin of Australasia, or northern margin of Gondwana in the Cenomanian. So I think our palynological data at the moment would favour a Gondwanan origin. Another group of plants that strongly suggests the development of multi-storied rainforests or strongly perhumid rainforests in the late Cretaceous are the ferns. This is a paper written by Harold Schneider and other authors, and it suggests that ferns diversified in the shadow of angiosperms, and these whole groups of clades developed as angiosperms diversified, and this is at the time at which rainforests would have developed in areas such as Africa. So there's a lot of reasons why we think rainforests probably first developed in the mid part of the late Cretaceous. Let's now follow our global paleogeographic maps up through the into the late Campanian. Now, if we compare African and South American pollen floras, I did this about 20 years ago, so it may need some revision. We find that it was in the Campanian that the African and South American pollen floras start to diverge. So you can see there's a lot of taxa here that are characteristic of restricted to South America, and these are taxa that occur in both Africa and South America. So it's likely that we start getting some differentiation of our older West Gondwanan flora at about this time. And so from this time onwards, we can visualize a proto-African flora. At this time, India is still a long way south, and we still find elements coming into India, such as Constantinosporus, which we saw earlier. We have a very poor record from Southeast Asia at this time. Moving up into the Maastrichtian, we continue with a flora which is characteristically African, so we call this the Proto-African flora. By this time, India was really shifting northwards towards the equator, and we start now to see some elements which definitely suggest dispersals from Africa to India. One is the pollen type Aquila pollinites. Now, Aquila pollinites is a global type, but there are some very distinctive morphotypes that are just characteristic of South America, equatorial Africa, and they first appear in the Maastrichtian in India in the Maastrichtian. So it definitely looks as if we've got some dispersals in this direction. At this time, we have a very limited flora occurring in Southeast Asia. Some of the pollen types we find that are quite well represented are Nipa proxiptites, but these don't give us very much paleogeographical information. What we do find from the fossil wood records from the Deccan traps, that there are many plant families that first appear in India at about this time: Anacardiaceae, Lamiaceae, Lecidacea, Barringtonia, Moraceae, Cimarobaceae, and Vitaceae, all present in the Deccan traps at about this time in the Maastrichtian. Now, if we look at the wood anatomy of these taxa in the paper by Elizabeth Wheeler and co., published a few years ago, we find that the wood anatomy suggests that the climate in this area was distinctly seasonal. So a seasonal tropical flora, tropical climate would have been about the case. Now, recently, Vandana Prasad has found some Shoria type pollen in the Deccan traps, and so gradually our picture of Dipterocarp evolution is developing, and the likelihood is this came from Africa, and we'll be just talking about the Africa-India dispersal of Dipterocarps later on. Right, moving up into the Paleocene, I want to make a reference to a paper by Venkatachala and co-authors, published way back in 1988. This was done together with Thani, who was, it was a very great shame that he came to an end in the Karachi hijack of 1985, because he had so he was such an enthusiastic guy, had so many fantastic ideas, and encouraged so many people, including myself, to get more and more involved in palynology of areas such as Southeast Asia. In this paper, they looked at Africa and South Africa and India, and they compared the floras, or the taxa, which were a diagnostic age in both areas, and they found that the greatest similarity was in the Paleocene. So the likelihood is that there were some opportunities for plant dispersal from Africa to India in the Paleocene. And as we'll discuss later on, we think this was a series of island arcs that we now term the Khorestan-Ladakh arc. And we'll be looking at that in more detail later on. Once we get up into the early Eocene, by this time, India has moved a little bit further north. Southeast Asia, on the other hand, has got a very limited flora. The most common elements are Almaceae. We get the Quilopolonites, very limited flora of tricolpates and tricolporates, a few megathermal elements, but basically what one could describe as perhaps a subtropical or warm temperate to subtropical flora, rather than anything that you would really think of as being a tropical flora. Now, by this time, we see many new elements appear in India, and this is as India moves across the equator and develops a very perhumid climate in its equatorial position. Oops. Right, now let's we'll continue with Scotty's maps, but we'll shift to my figure from the paper I wrote on assembly and division of the Southeast Asian flora, 2018. And on this figure, the grey lines here show the ranges of pollen taxa in India, or at least the ranges of the appearance of pollen taxa in India, and the black lines show the appearance of taxa in Southeast Asia. And we can see that the Indian elements start to appear in Southeast Asia in a number of stages, first appearing at about 48 million years. And some of the earlier taxa to disperse into Southeast Asia, the Durio or Durio type, Elangium, Largostromia, Barringtonia, and pollen that is derived from probably extinct members of the Arecae, a tribe of palms. So yeah, all of these dispersed from India through to Southeast Asia before the final collision. So there was still a water body between India and Southeast Asia at this time. So this was transoceanic dispersal, starting at about 48 million years. Then in the Middle Eocene, we see a change from more seasonal to more perhumid climates in Southeast Asia. And we start to see many more elements coming through from India, all of which have records in the Paleocene or early Eocene in the Indian subcontinent. And these include Beaupria, Sapindaceae, Centennial-Ophan, Gonistylus, one that we've just identified as Leptolena in Sarcolinaceae, and also Dipterocarps, which we'll again be discussing later on. So as we move a little bit younger, up to about to the late Eocene, I wrote a paper with Sebastian Klaus on a meta-analysis of molecular data from taxa, both animal and plant, that occurred in both India and Southeast Asia. And the conclusion from this is that the land connection between Asia and Southeast and between India and Southeast Asia was at about 41 million years. And it's just interesting that after this time, after about 40 million years or so, the new elements that we find occurring in the Indian and Southeast Asian floras occur in both areas at about the same time. And they are Marypolis, which is probably an extinct element of Myrtaceae, and Ceratopteris, the aquatic fern. And both of these are useful for palynological zonation in India, in Myanmar, and in Southeast Asia. So if we move up into the, I want to look at some examples of Indian early Eocene taxa that occur in the Middle Eocene of Java and Sulawesi. We'll start off with Palmepolonites kutchensis. These are photographs, light microscopy photographs from Sulawesi, from the Malawa Formation, which is Middle Eocene. And these are SEM images and TEM images from the Nangulan Formation, which I did together with Madeline Harley in the about 25 years ago. And so this group, indisputably palms, indisputably Araceae. When we thought that when we did this work, we tried to compare these pollen with modern pollen, and we found the closest comparison was with two genera that are endemic to New Caledonia, Basilinea and Beritacentia. And we're a little bit puzzled why this would have been why this was the case. I think now the story is becoming clearer, that the Araceae are a group that evolved probably in India or Madagascar and then spread widely across the area. The parent plant of Palmepolonites kutchensis was probably widespread across this area during the mid-Cenozoic, and then following late Cenozoic climate and tectonic changes, it became extinct in a lot of this region, but became isolated to New Caledonia, where it became an endemic. Another group that is very characteristic, Elangium section conostigma. Now, conostigma is differentiated from other Elangium by the fact that the neck scene thickens towards the meridional area, as you can see in this specimen of Lanagiopolis regularis. There are many different types that occur of Elangium pollen. That these are recorded from the Nangulan Formation in central Java, and we also have records from the early Eocene in India. So another nice example of a taxon that dispersed from India through to Southeast Asia in the Middle Eocene. Some other really interesting examples, Lachiopolis ovatus in Southeast Asia. This compares with Durio pollen in India. Its nearest affinity is Collenia, which is a very close ally of Durio. And another taxon, Bopreodites. I showed this pollen to the Bopreodites expert in Australia, Mary Detman, and she was absolutely convinced that this was properly identified. So this Gondwanan element, yeah, dispersed into Southeast Asia in the Middle Eocene, along with those other taxa prior to the collision of India with Asia. And here are some others, all more characteristic of humid climates. Cupanidites flaccidiformis, probably from Mishocarpus. Retistaphynocarpates williamsi, from a species of Cetenolophan, and Spinulitriparites spinosus, that reflect some Ixananthes. So you can see there are many groups of taxa which show this pattern. Let's look at dipterocarps. Now, we have good records of dipterocarp pollen from India, as we'll be talking about in a little while, but in the Middle Eocene, the records from Nangulan or from central Java are quite limited. We might have some pollen types there of Shorea, but that really needs cross-checking with the scanning electron microscope, because Shoria pollen is in isolation, in light microscopy, needs to be checked out with the SEM before you're really certain. But we do find in the Malawi coals, which are this is the formation that those Palmi pollinites came from, we find geochemical fossils by cadenanes. And the likelihood is that these probably came from dipterocarps. Although at the moment there is sometimes uncertainty, because they do occur in one other taxon, a genus called Mastixia. But the likelihood is that these were from dipterocarps, and that would suggest that dipterocarps were present in Southeast Asia in the Middle Eocene. This is a Dipterocarpus grain from the early Oligocene of Vietnam, where we have many records. This is another group, a taxon that I mentioned earlier was Leptolina. We've only just realized that this is Leptolina pollen. It occurs in the Middle Eocene in the Nangulan Formation in Java. So gradually we're building up this picture of the dispersal of the Indian flora into Southeast Asia in the Middle Eocene. Now let's look at dipterocarps, because that's a group of plants that has that is attracting a great deal of interest. We have, if we look at macrofossils, we have records from the Miocene, from the late Eocene, from the Middle Eocene. And I'll just discuss each of these in turn. This is a seed wing of a probable Paraschoria. And it's actually not from a terrestrial deposit at all. It's from a deep marine turbidite from the probably deposited at 3,000 meters water depth offshore Kalimantan. But it would have originated from a dipterocarp forest somewhere on Kalimantan, and then carried down the shelf in a turbidite flow and eventually deposited on the ocean floor. So just because we have leaf fossils doesn't mean to say that we have a terrestrial locality. This locality was absolutely full of leaf fossils. This is a dipterocarp seed from the late Eocene of southern China. This was described as a single species of Shoria by the authors, Feng and co. But I looked over this in detail with Peter Ashton, and he thinks this is a conglomerate of species within the Shoria clade, and that we have Paraschoria, a probable species within the subgenus Duna, and one other species that Peter was unable to place into any particular Shoria clade. So this definitely shows the presence of dipterocarps in southern China, but there is greater diversity than was suggested in the original paper. And then here we have fossil woods of Shorioxylum. These are from the Middle Eocene, described by Alexis Licht. And so these are on the Burma plate, and so would have been in place as India was colliding with the Khoestan-Ladakha arc in the Paleocene, early Eocene. And then finally, we have Dipterocarpus pollinites here from the early Eocene of India, and from Dutta, some very, very nice bicadenane records here. And recent work by Dutta suggests that these could only have come from dipterocarps, and I think that's very exciting. Now, recently we have found some other dipterocarp fossils. Our palynologist friends that I mentioned earlier from Sudan recorded a pollen type which they called Perireticyncolpites phosphaticus, and I thought this looked very dipterocarpus-like. So we asked them for some material from this, and they were very happy to provide it. And we have subsequently looked at that. Here are some light microscopy photographs, and this is the African specimen, and this is an Indian specimen photographed by Vandana, and you can see those are absolutely identical. So we have these look in all manner to be Dipterocarpus, and so we had Dipterocarpus occurring in the Maastrichtian of Sudan, and also in the Paleocene of India. We have very recently seen, only a couple of weeks ago, a leaf record from the Deccan Traps, which is at the Paleocene-Eocene boundary, also suggesting the presence of Dipterocarpus. So the evidence is going quite strongly for the presence of Dipterocarpus, both in the Paleocene of India and also in the Paleocene to latest Cretaceous of India, and also in the late Cretaceous of Sudan. So clearly there were opportunities for plants to disperse from Africa to India at this time. Now, if we look at the fossil record of Dipterocarpus, until recently, the record was mainly from the Neogene. The only records from the Paleogene are these two records here. From here was the German paleobotanist who wrote to Darwin about the mystery of angiosperm origins. So these records were published in 1877, about 150 years ago. No one has ever been back and re-looked at these localities. Other than these two, all of the Dipterocarpus macrofossils are from the Neogene. And remarkably, we have records from Africa, from Kenya, and from the Horn of Africa here, but nothing prior to the Neogene except for one possible record from the Eocene of India and the recent Dipterocarpus just published. But if we add the pollen record, I've added on here from India the records of Dipterocarpus retipillatus, the records of Dipterocarpus pollen from Southeast Asia, you can see over here, and also the record of Periretisyncolpites phosphaticus here, which we are now identifying as Dipterocarpus. And you can see a much more convincing pattern of origination in Africa and then dispersal across into India and Southeast Asia. Just to show you how convincing the pollen from the early Eocene of India is, this is a specimen of Dryobalanops photographed by Vandana. It's the combination of features that shows that this is absolutely definitively Dipterocarpus, or Dipterocarpoid. The big, the open colpi that you can see here, uniformly ornamented exene, minimal representation of margines, the absence of endexene, absence of nexene. You can see the bases of the collimallae poking out as little lumps here on the inner side of the exene, and this is exactly what you can see in modern Dipterocarps. The distinctive character of the exene ornamentation all suggest that this is a Dipterocarpoid grain, and the fact that these are just 30 microns in size suggests that these are in fact Dryobalanops rather than Dipterocarpus, but very closely related genus. This is Dryobalanops here, and this is Dipterocarpus on Herkenhauer's cladogram. So this is the record from Africa, and so you can see that the evidence for Paleogene Dipterocarp fossils is becoming very, very strong. Now, the fact that there were so few records from the Neogene has prompted a lot of discussion, and my suggestion is this is entirely due to taphonomy, that pollen and macrofossils deposited in different manners. And I'll show you the diagram here, which shows how pollen is transported and mixed as we move from from hinterland vegetation types through a coastal area here with maybe some swamps and some mangroves and into a marine environment. So the hinterland pollen will be produced here. So if we analyze a sample from this locality, it will just consist of pollen from this local area. But as we move into the upper coastal plain here, we'll get mainly pollen coming from the local region, but some hinterland pollen will be transported into here. When we're in the mangrove swamps along the coast here, we'll still find hinterland pollen transported, or only show a small proportion, represent a small proportion of the total. Then as we move away from the coastline, because the hinterland is a much bigger area in terms of acreage than the coastal vegetation, then the hinterland groups will start to increase in abundance again. And so we'll find very common hinterland pollen coming out here in deep marine environments. And this is called the Neves effect, originally identified in the Carboniferous by Roger Neves at Sheffield University. Now, if we look at macrofossils, on the other hand, they're much less likely to be transported great distances. So if there were dipterocarps growing in this area, then maybe unless they were actually elements of the lower coastal plain vegetation, we might not find them at all in these coastal vegetation types. And so these are the sort of factors that would explain why we get dipterocarp fossils in some time periods and not in others. It could be dipterocarp macrofossils. It could just be due to taphonomy. Now, with respect to the specimens that we saw from in deep marine environments, if sediments were deposited here, which had some dipterocarp fossils in, then the sea level fell due to unstable tectonics. This area then slumped down into the deep marine environment. We could then find these fossils also in deep marine turbidites, as we see in East Kalimantan. Right, let's just look at this situation between Africa and Africa and Southeast Asia. Africa and India during the course of the Paleocene and early Eocene. These are some diagrams published by Chatterjee and Scotes, and in the Paleocene Cretaceous KT boundary, they suggest a series of islands connecting Africa and India at this time, and this would also have incorporated the Burma plate that would have been laying in this sort of area. And so there would have been island arc lineament that would have allowed dispersal of plants and animals between Africa and India in the Paleocene. And then this is Chatterjee and Scotes' map for the for the late Paleocene, and we can see again that the likelihood of a corridor for dispersal of plants and animals was definitely a possibility. Now, to support these dispersal routes, I just wanted to show a diagram by Theory Smith and co, looking at the fauna, a very diverse fauna that occurs in Western India here, and elements of that appear to have dispersed from Africa in the Paleocene, and other elements appear to disperse between India and Europe or Asia in the early Eocene. So there's quite a lot of additional evidence from faunal data to support the view that fauna and flora were able to disperse from Africa to India in the Paleocene or the Maastrichtian. Now, to explain the history of dipterocarps, I produced this diagram here, which some people see this straight away. Other people have found it more difficult to understand. But I've put time here. I've then used Scotes maps to show the likely dispersal patterns that would have been present through time between Africa, India, and Southeast Asia, and superimposed on that climate reconstructions with what I'd call seasonally dry, seasonally wet, and perhumid climates. And basically, if dipterocarps developed established in Southeast Asia, established in Africa at about 80 million years or so, then the first opportunity for them to disperse through to India would have been when climates become a little bit moister, with seasonally wet climates in the Maastrichtian and Paleocene, and then more perhumid climates in the Eocene, somewhere up here. And this would have been the time of the presence of the Khorestan-Ladakh arc, and so there would have been opportunities for plants to disperse between the two areas at this time. Now, one may say, well, dipracarps have very poor dispersal capabilities, but we know, for instance, that if we go to New Guinea, which is represented over here, or Sulawesi, they have many species of dipracarps. They've never been connected to Southeast Asia, always been separated by wide water bodies. So we know that dipracarps can disperse across water bodies. So as long as we've got an island arc here and the same climate zone within different tectonic areas, we would expect to see some plant dispersals. Now, the same applies between India and Southeast Asia. As India is moving towards Southeast Asia before the collision, then elements would have been able to disperse from India to Southeast Asia in that time. That not only includes the dipracarps, but also Sarcalinaceae, as you saw from the record of Leptolina, which we saw earlier. Now, as we go up through into the mid-Cenozoic, then the climate across Southeast Asia became much more monsoonal. And so the opportunities for perhumid dipracarps became much less. With the expansion of perhumid climates across Southeast Asia at the beginning of the Miocene, dipracarps expanded there, and from the Miocene onwards has been the time of great proliferation of the dipracarpaceae in Southeast Asia. With the uplift of the Himalaya, especially in the middle Miocene, coinciding with the thermal maximum, is thought to have created opportunities for dispersal of dipracarps back from Southeast Asia into India along its north, and these are preserved in the Sawaliks in northern India, and that accounts for why we find Malaysian affinity dipracarps in the mid-Miocene of India. So they dispersed back into India rather than originating there. Now then, as we get up into the Pleistocene, with the development of Northern Hemisphere glaciations and global trend towards desiccation, India became a much less favorable place for dipracarps. So they were just isolated to a few pockets in the south, in the Western Ghats, also in Sri Lanka, but became more or less restricted to the Southeast Asian region. At this time, we had tectonic events in eastern Indonesia and Papua, with the northern shift of Australia caused the uplift of New Guinea and the formation of Sulawesi and Ceram and places like the Moluccas. And this created opportunities for dipracarps to again island hop across to Sulawesi and New Guinea during the later Neogene. Right. Well, I think that covers the dispersal of taxa from Africa via India through to Southeast Asia. Now, to clarify the story of the evolution of the Southeast Asian flora, the big outstanding issue, I think, relates at the moment more to tectonics than it does to interpreting, to obtaining fossil records, because there's a major tectonic issue which is hindering our understanding, I think, of the development of the Southeast Asian flora. And so I don't want to go over in detail the history of the Southeast Asian flora, which you can see from a number of papers. But what I want to look at is some characters of certain floras which conflict with the present perspective of the tectonics of Southeast Asia. And to do that, I really want to look at upland floras, the floras that were growing in the mountains during the course of the Cenozoic across the Southeast Asian region. Now, there are two very contrasting plate tectonic models for Southeast Asia. One of them is more or less ignored present time, and that's this model of Toponier. Toponier placed Borneo about 10 to 15 degrees north in the Oligocene, something like this. So Borneo at this time would have been in the seasonal tropical position, 10 to 15 degrees north of the equator. The other model is this model by Robert Hall, which is a remarkable model. I mean, we've used this model for many, many years. It's completely fascinated us and how this model is developed. It's based largely on paleomagnetic data by a very great friend and colleague, now deceased, of mine, Neville Hale, worked in Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur for many years. But the paleomag data suggests that Borneo was more or less on the equator throughout the Cenozoic. Now, there's a lot of current perspectives that suggest that paleomag data is misleading and that Borneo was much more likely in its more northerly position, as suggested here from Toponier. So I want to just look at these two models, look at some data from montane floras to see which fits best with these two models. So at the present time, there are many mountain ranges across Southeast Asia. We have the Barisan, we have Malaysia, Javanese volcanoes, we have central Kalimantan ranges, Kinabalu, Maratus, the Shwena, West Sarawak, and maybe leading up to Natuna, the Malay range here. And then we have these three major ranges, and Annamites, the Indo-Chinese, Burma-Chinese ranges, etc., here in Indochina. Now, all of these have very different geological histories. So a few years ago, 2018, I was asked to review the evolution of montane floras across Southeast Asia. And so I divided them into two groups. Groups that are characteristic, that contain southern hemisphere conifers, such as southern hemisphere gymnosperms, such as podocarps, Daguicarpus, Phyllocladus, Daquidium, and they're marked here in blue. And others that are characterized by Laurasian elements of Pinacea. The best examples are Tsuga and Picea, but also Pinus and Abies. Now, I want to look at the record for Tsuga and Picea. There are issues with Abies because it has the same pollen type as Keteleria, and that has a slightly different history. So we'll, and I want to exclude Pinus for reasons which you'll see in a minute. This is shows the distribution of herbarium records of Pinacea from across the whole northern hemisphere. And you can see that it's only in Southeast Asia that we find records occurring at relatively low latitudes. And all of these dots here just reflect to two species of Pinus, Pinus mercusii and Pinus caesa, and those have become adapted to seasonally dry, well-drained tropical soils in the Indo-Chinese area, extending down into Sumatra. And this locality here is the southernmost record of Pinus and the only record of Pinacea in the southern hemisphere. It's about 2 degrees south in the Kerinci area of central Sumatra. So I want to look at the record of especially Tsuga and Picea through time to see what they tell us about the history of upland floras and if they'll tell us anything about plate tectonics. To do this, I've looked at the record of palynological data sets that I've been involved with over some 40 years, marked here in these yellow dots. Each reflects a well section. It may cover a section that just represents a short period of time, or it may cover a period going from, say, the Pliocene into the early Oligocene. So some are very extensive, others are not. Now, all of these wells have been subdivided using the subdivisions indicated here, which we have called VIM depositional cycles, and VIM means Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia. These are transgressive regressive packages which we can fingerprint to specific time periods and correlate across the region. And we've just renamed these Southeast Asian cycles, only published this year after I actually gave this talk in March. So we can date most of these localities reasonably accurately. So what I want to do is just pick out the records of Paisia and Tsuga. They're marked here in yellow and red, and tell you a little bit about the ecology of these two species, these two genera. They occur today at in the northern hemisphere, but also, with respect to the tropics, they only occur together on Taiwan. Tsuga is widely represented just in the seasonal, warm temperate areas of China, more or less extending down to the Tropic of Cancer somewhere here. So these are really temperate elements. When we find them on mountains, they occur in very foggy, cool upper montane localities such as this. So if we find pollen like these, it suggests that somewhere in the river catchments that produce this pollen, these habitats are probably present. So this is a map for the Pliocene. We can see that we've got low numbers of specimens. We have to bear in mind that both of these pollen types are very well dispersed. So if we find one or two, it doesn't mean anything. But if we find many specimens, it suggests it might tell us something about where these were coming from. So we've got a little concentration of pollen here, and maybe that was brought down by the Mekong, maybe from up here. So this would be completely consistent with the present distribution of these taxa. And if we move back to the late Miocene, we can see that there's a very clear demarcation line here. North of that, we find common specimens, and this suggests that the plants that produce these were growing probably not too far away, maybe in the Annamites here, maybe in the cardamoms, something like this. So it suggests that there were some mountains here that are probably no longer there or much reduced in size. And it also tells us something about the climate, which would have been cool and probably wet, a very wet, cool, foggy climate, as we see over here. We move down to the mid-Miocene. We can see that this boundary moves a little bit further south, overall same pattern. And when we move into the early Miocene, a little bit further shift, by this time we begin to feel that some of this pollen could be coming from an area here, which I call the Conson Swell. And as we get further back in time, this becomes more prominent. This is from the earliest part of the late Miocene, and this is from the Oligocene. And in the Oligocene, the Kulong Basin, which is this area here, developed various deltas, and some of those deltas were northward prograding. So they must have originated from uplands that were occurring in this area here. And those yield common Tsuga and Paisia pollen. So that pollen must have come from this upland area here, which I'm calling the Conson Swell. So clearly, this area here was characterized by, must be quite high mountains, and they're likely to be distinctly seasonal, have a distinctly seasonal climate too. We carry on down, then we see this same pattern. And I think you can see from this that over the course of the mid-Cenozoic, this shift, this boundary here, which relates to the southern boundary of the northern hemisphere Hadley cell, shifts from about this position through to about this position. Now, I want to show these using John Teasdale's unpublished tectonic maps. These are his maps based on alignments of basement terrains, which are what these distinctive colors show. And this basically follows Taponier's model. Now, the purple colors here reflect localities where we think we have evidence for these wet, foggy, very high altitude localities. And the light blue here areas where we think we have evidence for deciduous temperate forests occurring on these mountains, because these yield quite common pollen of juglans, carrier, pterocarrier, and a few others. So if I run through this map series, which shows the rotation of into Southeast Asia during the course of the mid-Cenozoic, you can see that using this plate tectonic model, the position of the boundary showing the southern limit of these pollen types remains in about the same place. But during that time, the upland floras gradually disappear and replaced in the southern area by Gondwanan elements dominated by gymnosperms. And I'll just show you that again. Sorry, and this is the Pleistocene. So let me just run through that again from the about the late Eocene, about 40 million years. You can gradually see the seasonal montane forests characterized by deciduous angiosperms disappearing and gradually being replaced by lower montane forests and subsequently upper montane forests of Gondwanan origin. Now, those that trend exactly ties with this rotational model showing Borneo rotating into the equatorial zone in the course of the Oligocene and the early Miocene. If we reconstructed these with Borneo occurring at the equator, then we would have to have Eurasian conifers occurring way south of the equator during throughout much of the Cenozoic, and that seems very unlikely to me. So, if we have Borneo in an equatorial position through time, this follows Robert Hall's model, then I've plotted on here an approximate indication of the representation of seasonal or monsoonal climates through time and perhumid climates through time. Now, what this would suggest is that in the Paleocene, we would have seen subtropical aspect floras occurring in Sarawak right on the equator, which seems unlikely. We would need very widespread perhumid forests to occur across Borneo during the Eocene, which we tend not to see. We would expect a climate style across the equatorial zone in the Oligocene, which would not be supported by any climate models, in that the equatorial zone would be strongly seasonal, and we would expect perhumid climates just on the southern margin of the Sunda region over here. And then we see rainforest expansion, which we put down to the initiation of the East Asian monsoon at about 23 million years. And then we would have a situation like this, which we have today, with widespread rainforests across Borneo and Southeast Asia up to the present time. So we can see some real anomalies here within the Oligocene and within the Eocene and within the Paleocene. However, if Borneo rotates into the equator, and so this is our rotation of Borneo into the equatorial zone, then our subtropical aspect floras in the Paleocene would be much more realistic, occurring in close to the limit of the present-day tropics, down here in the Paleocene. We would see the Indian flora come in here in the Middle Eocene, and develop from being seasonal to being more per-humid, which is what we actually see in the record in areas such as South Sulawesi and Java. In the late Eocene, the southern part of Sunda submerged dramatically, so the equatorial zone wouldn't have borne any per-humid forests at all during that period of time, and that would much more realistically explain why we get strongly monsoonal climates through the Oligocene. And then as Borneo rotates into the equatorial position in the latest Oligocene and early Miocene, that would explain very nicely why we see such an expansion of per-humid forests and then per-humid forests continually present from the Miocene onwards. And those are the two scenarios. We want to try and develop more data, more justification to support either one or the other of these models. At the moment, I think the Borneo rotating into the equator model is the strongest. Right, to finish our story up about the history of the Paleotropical province, we just want to see what is happening towards the east of the Sunda region. During this time, Australia was shifting northward very rapidly and resulted in the uplift of the New Guinea flora, the uplift of New Guinea, and also the formation of Sulawesi. And both of these have always been isolated by oceans throughout geological time. And yet, if we look at their floras, they're mainly of Malaysian origin, including Dipterocarps. So as far as lowland taxa are concerned, it was the presence of their occurrence within the same climatic zone, the per-humid climate zone, that encouraged dispersal from the Sunda region into the lowlands of Sulawesi and New Guinea. Whereas if we look at the montane floras, they're much more characteristically Australian. So if we're looking in the mountains of New Guinea, we might think we're in Australia, whereas if we're looking at the lowlands of New Guinea, we might well think that we're in Southeast Asia. And the uplift of New Guinea has recently been very nicely explained by in a paper by Toussaint and others, and Robert Hall is responsible for making these beautiful little models of the development of New Guinea over time. And you can see that New Guinea gradually shifted northwards into the equatorial zone, so the flora, the lowland tropical flora, more or less kept place and was more or less immediate as soon as appropriate climates and land areas became available. So that's more or less it. A few conclusions. What is the age of the Paleotropical rainforest flora? Well, maybe in the Pacific here, we might find some old components coming from island arcs from the Pacific. I've always thought that that in the Pacific Islands, there's a lost Pacific flora, but we haven't found any evidence for that yet, mainly because we haven't looked in the right places at the right rocks. But if we look at each of these areas, then it's likely that many Eudicot families originated in Africa and South America. And I think that's consistent with what we've seen in this talk. In Southeast Asia, however, there are hardly any Eudicot families that have originated in this area at all. Now, In this discussion, you've seen that there are in fact several groups that may well have originated or at least diversified in India. So, but that would have been in the Paleocene to early Eocene. And then we saw the development of the flora in New Guinea and Sulawesi during the late Miocene. Now, there are some very ancient elements that we saw before, the archaeoangiospermae. They dispersed from New Guinea to New Guinea from Australia at some time. But basically, these are the ages that we would place on our floras. The African rainforest flora probably dates back to 75 million years. The Indian rainforest flora dates back to about 65 million years. The Southeast Asian rainforest flora dates back to about 48 million years as we see those Indian elements move in. And the Pacific islands here probably date from about 10 million years. Now, in a lot of literature, in documentaries on the television, we often hear that these forests around here are really ancient. You know, I think even David Attenborough was saying that the Daintree forests here were about 130 million years old. Well, that's about 20-30 million years older than the first record of angiosperms in northern Australia. So these should be taken with a pinch of salt. The oldest rainforests from Africa, Southeast Asia, relatively young among rainforest standards at about 48 million years. Just a few conclusions then that we can bring from this, that the Paleotropical kingdom has its roots in Africa during the late Cretaceous. This was after it became separated from South America. Many Paleotropical families originated in Africa. India may have carried some elements from Madagascar, but most of its perhumid megathermal elements probably reached India from the Horn of Africa via the Khorestan-Ladakh arc during the Paleocene. And it's likely that the Khorestan-Ladakh arc actually acted as an evolutionary hotspot due to its the combination of tectonics, presence of islands, created just the position where we could get diversification. India's perhumid megathermal flora diversified as it lay across the equator in the Eocene, and many of these elements were lost as a result of late Neogene desiccation. Many elements of the Indian flora dispersed to Southeast Asia as it approached and eventually collided with Asia in the Middle Eocene. Its perhumid flora expanded in the late Oligocene, early Miocene, as Borneo rotated into an equatorial position. No major plant families actually seem to have originated in Southeast Asia. All its higher taxa are immigrants. And lowland paleotropical elements dispersed to the islands of eastern Malaysia during the late Miocene and numerically dominate over lowland elements with respect to elements from Australia. Finally, just a few comments and suggestions about paleobotanical, paleontological issues. There's currently no real centre for palynology or macrofossil paleobotany that deals with either Southeast Asia or Africa. If there's an interest in calibrating molecular phylogenies, we need a fossil record and a local centre of excellence in plant fossil studies to evaluate these areas. Remarkably, virtually no paleobotanical work on macrofossils has been undertaken in Southeast Asia after the last 50 after the last 50 years. The rich leaf floras from the Middle Eocene of in Kalimantan and Sumatra have been really virtually unstudied for 130 years. To understand the Gondwanan origins of Indian and Southeast Asian floral elements, we need more paleontological and paleobotanical studies in Africa. And for this, we need cooperation with workers from Africa, together with those from Southeast Asia and India. Now, although the petroleum industry has provided the data generated by the petroleum industry has provided a fantastic background for the backdrop of the evolution of the flora of the region. This needs to be ground truthed with detailed quantitative studies using outcrops and cores. So this really is the next stage to develop this history of floras from the region. And we need new perspectives on the tectonics of the region. I think that the tectonics of the Sunda Shelf region are poorly understood. I think this will come to will become much more clarified over the next year or so. And we need more fossil calibrated family-wide assessments of tropical families based on molecular data. So still lots to be done to sort out the pattern of the history of floras from Africa through to India and into Southeast Asia.
Thank you, Dr. Morley, for delivering a very interesting and informative lecture on the topic Plant Dispersals from Africa to Southeast Asia and the Age of Paleotropical Rainforest. Commencing with today's virtual program, it is my pleasant duty to propose the vote of thanks on successful completion of today's Founders Day function. On behalf of the Director BSIP, Dr. Vandana Prasad, Scientific Event Coordination Committee SECC, the Welfare Committee of the Institute, and my own, I thank the staff members of the Institute for memorizing Professor Birbal Sahni and Sir Albert Charles Seward in the form of two separate lectures in their honor. We are grateful to the speakers, Professor GBR Prasad from Center for Advanced Studies in Geology, University of Delhi, for delivering the 50th Birbal Sahni Memorial Lecture, and Professor Robert John Morley, who is Director Pelinova in United Kingdom, for delivering the 64th Sir Albert Charles Seward Memorial Lecture. We thank the Registrar BSIP, Mr. Sandeep Kumar Shivhare, and administrative staff members of the Institute, including SOSA, for providing their support to organize today's lectures. Success of today's event could not be possible without the support from various committees of the Institute. We sincerely acknowledge the support provided by Welfare, Museum, Auditorium, Computer, Audiovisual, and Garden committees for their contributions in successfully organizing today's virtual event. We are also thankful to the audience for their gracious presence during today's lectures. This is to inform that as part of the Founders Day function, floral tributes will be offered on the Samadhi of Professor Birbal Sahni at 9:30 a.m. IST, that is tomorrow, on the 14th November 2020, within the Institute's premises, followed by an award distribution ceremony at 10 a.m. IST tomorrow. We shall make arrangements to bring to you all the online streaming of tomorrow's program to be held in BSIP via the YouTube web platform, and the link for the same will be shared via an email. Thank you all.